to This is Harlem Is Healing Dialogue. I'm Rhina Valentin, and today we will be honoring East Harlem luminary Aurora Flores. Before we meet her, please indulge me in providing background on Harlem Is Healing, a program of Community Works and New Heritage Theater Group. It began in 2020 to highlight contributions by 48 community members responding to the pandemic and its disproportionate impact on Harlem and communities of color over 2 years. That original impetus expanded to include response to calls for social justice, to voting rights, to community policing, to the very meaning of democracy itself. In the end, we all find ourselves dealing with the need for community healing and seeking our communal lessons learned. In an effort to shine a light on our community healing together, we're highlighting individuals who are dedicated to using their platforms to preserve our uptown culture. Aurora Flores is an award-winning communications professional, producer, public relations consultant through her agency Aurora Communications. She is a storyteller, a writer who has earned 2 Emmys for her TV scripts, Pasos Latino over BET and Nueva Estrellas with WCBS. She is a BMI composer and the band leader of her own group, Son del Barrio. Most importantly, she is a proud Boricua, Latin from Manhattan, who for decades, I should say, continues to be committed to cultural advocacy while preserving both urban and music history. Everyone, please welcome Aurora Flores.
Thank you, Rina. Thank you. That was a great intro.
Well, thank you for taking the time to be with us today. We are here at the top of 2022, and bueno, our world is still navigating through this COVID era with the most recent Omicron surge impacting us over the holidays, in which I know you recently recovered from it. Blessings to you. So let's just open up by having you share how you and your work have been impacted over the past 2+ years, because we're about to go on 3 years of dealing with this.
Yeah. I have to tell you, I think it's just turned the world upside down. And we've been in uncharted territory. So it's even difficult to describe it. On top of all that, all the deaths that have happened, I've had 15 people that I know, and that was right at the beginning, die of this. At the beginning, there was so much confusion. We had an administration who wasn't giving us all the information. So we knew, everyone knew something was wrong, but we really didn't know what. And then we have an agency that deals with these kinds of pandemics, with these kinds of flus, with these kinds of things that can happen, and no one was listening to them, or else they were listening to them and then they weren't. It was so bad. It was so bad. It created such confusion that we were all upside down, I think. We were all upside down.
And so I see you have a coworker there. That's what we refer to our in the household.
Yes, the co-host here, Rocky.
Rocky. I just saw, Rocky wanted to make an appearance.
Yes, he did. So sometimes he goes to the computer screen and wants to go on there, but he's cool. Well, but yeah,
that's a wonderful topic at hand. I mean, it's lovely that you have a companion, right? Even though it's a pet. And then so, just going back to our initial question of just acclimating and pivoting, after not being able to perform on stage, especially working like alongside the greats such as Alfredo Chocolate Armenteros, Nicky Marrero, Eddie Palmieri, Yomo Toro, and Larry Harlow, who we recently lost in 2021, and who I understand you've also written a book with. Have you felt a sense of displacement?
Completely. I felt completely like I lost my place in life. You lost your place within your workplace. You lost your place within family. You lost your place within friends. I felt like I had lost my place. And then with all the death going on, there was a point at the beginning of the pandemic, I was afraid to pick up the phone. I didn't want to hear about one more person that had fallen to this COVID. So it was very confusing. It was almost, I would say, a time of mourning. It was very dark. And not only in the US, all over the world, it was very, very dark, to the point that I was crying every day. Now I chant, usually I chant in the mornings and I feel good and it helps me the rest of the day. I was crying during the chant.
I wanted to share that we both share that in common. We're both Nichiren Daishonin Bodhisattvas.
Yes.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I did want to share that. I forgot to mention that. We do share that in common.
Which is why I know you understand. So in the mornings I'm chanting and it usually makes me feel good. And this time, the first few months, and I had just come from Puerto Rico. I had this great vacation. Well, I thought I was having a great vacation in Puerto Rico. And then we had the earthquakes. So, but I stayed with my family. I told them, no, I'm staying here. I'm not taking the next flight back. We're in this together. Either we all go down or I'm not leaving. And I stayed there. And it was such an experience to see how the people themselves galvanized themselves to help them. They didn't wait for the government. They didn't wait for anyone. And I'm talking about from the media to the artists, to the neighbors, to the doctors, to the teachers, to the priests, the Buddhists, the monks, the santeros. It was incredible how we helped each other. It was incredible, the sense of humanity helping each other. Then I come here and we get the pandemic. And instead of that sense of community that I felt in Puerto Rico, I didn't feel that here. What I felt was a shredding of society. That's what I felt. There was a shredding of society. I felt like they were trying to cover something up. I knew something bad was happening that we couldn't really get a control of, and we weren't given the correct information. We were being confused. So that made it even worse. And at one point, I was just, I couldn't get over the sadness. I just couldn't get over the crying. And I remember calling my brother, and we were all socially distanced. I didn't even dare to go to his house. He didn't want to come to mine. And I told him.
Well, yeah, I mean, at the beginning, we didn't know what it was. We didn't know if it was airborne. We didn't know how it was being spread. I mean, there was so much disinformation being put out there that we didn't know what to expect and who was going to get it and how it was going to impact. I mean, those were some scary times, like 2020 into 2021.
Yeah, I remember at the beginning of April, I covered myself up and I said, I have to get stuff, for the house because I'm not going to go out. I literally almost didn't go out the whole month of April. And I remember when I went out, I saw some neighbors, and then the neighbors, we were all scared to hug each other. So we're keeping apart. And the moment I saw my neighbor, I just started crying. And they were crying too, because it was like, we didn't know what was going to happen. It was almost an end of the world type of scenario. And I called my brother. I told him, I can't take this. Let's write a song. I have to do something to bring up my spirit. And we couldn't go into a studio or anything. So I said, let's do it on the iPhone. So I said, he came up with this little coro. We both came up with words and melodies. And then, so I sang the song into the iPhone. And then I sent it to him so he could put the Plena beats. And I wanted it to be a Plena because Plena is joyful, but it also gives news and current events. So it falls into my whole journalistic background, plus the songwriting background. And
yeah, I wanted to but I also want to educate our audience as to what a Plena is, right? So we know what a Plena is, but let's just give them a background, right? Because you also play other kinds of music. You participate in salsa. Also, what's the other one?
Jazz.
Jazz. Yeah, but no, there's another one that is the origins of salsa. I forgot. You're the music historian, so please help me out.
Afro Boricua.
Mambo, isn't it mambo?
Mambo, yes, mambo.
Mambo,
cha-cha. Yes.
Right.
Mambo.
So let's just educate our audience on what a Plena is.
Plena is a native Puerto Rican rhythms, and you play them with hand drums. So they're mobile. And back in the day, like at the turn of the last century, there was so much poverty in Puerto Rico. There were newspapers, but people didn't read. So the pleneros would go from town to town and they would let people know what was going on. Sometimes it was very irreverent and funny. And it would talk about they saw, the mayor of one town in another town in a bar or with someone else, or somebody's husband with someone else. So it would give gossip, but it would also give news. It would give news about what was going on in the towns. And then when they started having the first strikes, when factories came into Puerto Rico, let's say in the 40s and 50s, and there were the first strikes, it was the Plena guys who would go on the lines protesting with the protesters and would come up with these witty sayings that would not only give context to what was going on, but would lift the message up. And everybody, like what happened with Cosello, the protests of Cosello, if people saw that footage, you would see that among the protesters were the drummers. Right. And they were making up all kinds of songs. And all of this stems back, my dear, to Africa, because in Africa and in those countries, and even in Roman times everywhere, whenever there's a battle, what drives the warriors into battle is a drum. The drummers are there first, or else a trumpet, something heralds them into that battle. And what is that? It's music.
Yes, music is the universal language of just even establishing like the mood, right? And so I wanted us to share that with the audience so that they understand that you chose to create this song. It's called Plena Corona song.
I call it Plena Corona.
No, let me give them the whole title. It's Plena Corona Song de Aurora.
Plena Corona de Aurora.
Yeah, Plena Corona de Aurora. Exactly. And so, and thank you for the historical lesson. It's very important for our next generation, especially. I feel very strongly about this particular time that we're living in, and so I wondered, like, what relevance you feel that it will carry for generations to come, in just the lyrics, the style. I mean, even the video, it captured like. The silence that we were experiencing in New York, which is unheard of.
I know.
New York.
I know. And not only that, have you ever gone into a supermarket in New York and seen the shelves empty? I had never seen that in New York. You could see it anywhere else, but not in New York. And so I went out with my little camera after I sang the song. And then those
stores that you captured, were they here in East Harlem? Were they in El Barrio? Because I know you captured like certain landmarks of New York, but I just wondered like which one of those images are representing East Harlem?
Right at the beginning, where I show an image that says "wash your hands," it's like spray painted. I was on my way to Costco when I saw that. And I said, I have to take a picture of this, because it was like the community already knew. Wash your hands, put on a mask. And they were telling us with the graffiti what to do. So I thought that was really important. Then my other friend, Alfie Alvarado, she was in Brooklyn. So she was taking photos in Brooklyn. I was taking photos here. I said, let's put them together, because I have to tell you, when I was seeing musicians doing online recordings, and you saw the little windows and everyone's trying to play. The problem with that is that because we're doing it on the internet, there's a delay in what you hear. So you're not really playing with each other. There's all these little milliseconds of delays. It affects the sound. It affects the camaraderie. It affects the creative expression. It affects and I went, I don't want to do that. I don't want a bunch of little windows with everybody looking sad and playing. I didn't want to do that. So then I said, I want to make this like a PSA. I want to let people know what's going on, what the communities look like. I was walking there's photos there of Mount Sinai, because when I started walking to Mount Sinai, and then I started seeing them putting tents in Central Park to do. And then I started seeing.
I know. I'm with you. I saw it.
And then I saw the trucks,
the portable hospital. that they created on the grass.
And then I saw the trucks with the freezers because they didn't have enough room in the morgue. I have to tell you, it was every day I was just crying and crying.
And you came up with this beautiful song that in some form, like you're right in calling it a PSA, a cultural PSA at that, right? But there's something hopeful in the way you presented it.
I needed to have something hopeful. I needed to have something that would show what we were going through. But my mother always used to say, al mal tiempo, buena cara. So even though I was so depressed, I said, I
al
have
mal
to
tiempo, buena cara, translated to English is in bad times, good face.
Yeah, yeah.
I just want
silver lining or a silver lining on a cloud, whatever.
Right.
But it's like
that's the metaphor.
Bad times, that's when you put on the good face.
Right.
And that's what I wanted to do. So I put all the pictures together. I even included a picture of Cuomo, which I remember my brother told me, are you going to make it political? I said, no, but Cuomo, I have to tell you, with everything that Cuomo went through, and politically, I do know that Cuomo can be a bully. And he actually delayed a lot of things that we wanted to put in. But however, during that confusing time, he was the only one that gave us some kind of explanation.
Yes, and that broke it down in layman's terms in a way that we could feel some sense of certainty. Even though we were living in uncertain times, which we still are, there was something about his delivery that he was the one I went to too. I mean, that was the live presentation, the only one that I would listen to, because I personally was like really limiting on the media information that was being fed to us on a daily basis. It was really wow. It was overwhelming.
It was. But what I was doing, even during that time, I kept journals. I've actually had 3 journals that I filled up, and every day it was like. And he would give me hope, and he would explain stuff, and it would make me feel better. So I felt that because I'm capturing that little bit of time, I wanted to put him on, and I wanted to capture him the way I saw him on the TV. On the TV screen. And that's what we were looking at. And so
he was in some form our security blanket. I mean, at least that's what he was for me. And so, I want to lead into you in your leadership role as in the community, as a woman who has broken barriers, being the first woman correspondent for Billboard magazine. You've worked very closely with elected officials such as former Speaker and Council Member Melissa Mark Viverito, which concluded with you writing her legacy report. That's amazing. Congratulations on that. And you've also been instrumental assisting institutions such as United Way and the Hispanic Federation. So with all the years you've invested in building as a woman of color and even piggybacking off of what we were just discussing, how do you feel about our current social climate with issues such as Black Lives Matter, voter suppression, and most importantly, the banning of abortion rights? I mean, doesn't it feel like we're going 50 years back?
We are going 50 years back. And it's very, very frustrating, very sad, and most important, it's very scary. I was very much affected by politics. My mother always taught me about the history of Puerto Rico since I can remember. I remember she used to tell me when she would see me writing on the walls, and actually sat me down and taught me my first words to write, mama, papa, pollo, casa. And she would tell me that it was in my blood. I didn't understand what she was saying. I would come home from school and she would question me, did they teach you about hostos? I'm like, no, ma. Washington, Lincoln, I don't know about that man. I thought maybe she was just trying to make me feel good, until I went to Puerto Rico at 11 and they showed me the statue and she's telling me about him. And then right after that, I was like 10 years old. We come back to the community, and at that time, Barrillo was in the community, in the hood, with Robert Kennedy and John Kennedy. And I remember they want a little makeshift stand.
What, you are dating yourself? You are dating.
Yes, and I remember I was with my mother and we climbed up to the box and he shook my mother's hand and he shook my hand, John Kennedy. I never forgot that. And my mother, I remember memorizing his speech. Ask not what you could do, what the country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. So there were certain mantras, there were certain beliefs that I was raised with. So when I started my career, of course, politics was always a part of it. When the Young Lords happened and I was 14, I remember getting Palante and reading it to my mother. And my mother would like correct some of the information on the history of Puerto Rico and tell me about it. I mean, it was, we have lived in very political times.
I know. I mean, you lived through the Young Lords, right? I mean, the Young Lords were a huge factor here in East Harlem in raising awareness of the needs. And it's unfortunate. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because, you know, we both reside in East Harlem. And I feel as if though we're reliving certain aspects that I would have assumed we would have moved forward and corrected where we are today.
We're going backwards. And I think sometimes as a society, sometimes we have to move. And I've seen this, for example, when I went to Panama with Ismael Rivera to carry the Black Christ of Panama. And in that procession, they bring out this platform with this life-size statue, and there's thousands of people there. And they proceed with a drum leading them, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. And I feel like we're going back now. And maybe we have to take those steps back in order to jump forward. Because what this pandemic to me has shown, it has exposed everything. It has exposed the good and the bad. It has turned the world around to show us really how spoiled we are and how privileged we have been. And now, is it a great equalizer? I don't know if it's an equalizer as it has exposed all of this, the good and the bad. And then you have here in America, a group of people who have been angry ever since Obama. And because of the win of Obama, they are hell-bent of bringing us back. I remember telling a young lady, and this was about 3 years ago, how concerned I was for Roe v. Wade. I remember women getting illegal abortions. Yeah, I remember that. I remember aunts, friends of my mother. I remember women dying because of that. And I have to say, even before the Young Lords, it was the music at that time, because we had music in the schools. Mm-hmm. It was the music and the musicians who were giving this message of protests. It was like Boogaloo. Boogaloo was all about what was going on in the communities. People like Joe Bataan, people like Joe Cuba, they were Joe Cuba has a whole thing that's a rap about it. I know,
he's from El Barrio too. So,
and he's from El Barrio, yeah. So the music, and I believe the music paved the way for also people like the Young Lords, because then when the concerts were going big, I remember just like the Black Panthers were doing security for the R&B groups, the Young Lords were doing security for the salsa groups. So this was all
community. It's community. That's what we're talking about.
And it's like a plate of our food, everything on one plate. It wasn't separated like the bread here and the meat here, like TV dinners. This is the only country in the world that separates food and separates people and separates everything. And so backwards.
Yeah, no, well, we're going to talk about bringing it back and bringing us together and keeping it local, right? Because we have to mention the hope that exists within your initiatives, right? Which is, let's talk about the East Harlem Holiday Tree Committee, bringing light, love, and hope into the community. And that's That's been going on for 20 years now. I mean, I've even witnessed the growth along with the highly anticipated tree lighting event, in which I understand that you had to produce 2 videos to bring it on virtually since we couldn't gather. So, in light of everything we just discussed, why is that tradition such an important one to you and the committee, East Harlem, El Barrio?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. The East Harlem Holiday Tree was important to me. I became a volunteer about 5 years ago, and yes, it's going to be 20 years old this year. And it was important because
congratulations on that. I mean that the corazón, because that's a commitment that you've basically volunteered yourself to make sure that you're shedding this light on not only the community, but the people who reside within the community, so that there's this tradition that is part of our annual celebration. And despite the circumstances, you still made it happen.
Well, it's an all volunteer group. All of us in this committee volunteer. We all have other jobs, but we have all made it happen. And again, when I did the first video, which is longer, and I wanted to do a video that not only talked about the history of this committee, but the history of East Harlem. Everybody starts with the Young Lords. And I love what they did, because the Young Lords, to me, they were like a public relations engine more than anything else, because they brought attention to what was happening. But way before the Young Lords, in the 30s, in 1935, the first race riots in Harlem was started because an Afro-Boricua boy, 10 years old, was murdered in a drugstore in Harlem because he was accused of stealing a penknife. They took him to the basement and beat him so bad. And at that time, there were little pockets of the NAACP, you know, there were little store fronts, and they got together. And at that time, both communities, the Puerto Rican community here and the Black community in Harlem, were together protesting for our rights. I remember Vito Marcantonio, the socialist congressman from Harlem, with Adam Clayton Powell, the father in Harlem, got together so that Blacks and Puerto Ricans can have their own businesses, which is why when Puerto Ricans came in the second wave in the 50s, all these Puerto Ricans had bodegas. How did that happen? It happened back then. In the mid-30s, that's when it happened. And we have to know our history. And it doesn't just start in the late 60s. It starts from when we started coming here. After our island was colonized, it was taken over by the US in 1898. And then in 1917, we were imposed citizenship. We didn't ask to come here. We weren't coming here in boats. We weren't going under tunnels. We weren't doing any of that. We were very happy in Puerto Rico. We were growing Puerto Rico. We had freedom from Spain. And then the US comes and just takes us over. But we started coming here in the 20s. And who are the first ones that come? Who are the first ones that they tap to gentrify any community? The artists. So you had people like Rafael Hernandez, an international composer, who opens the first Latin music record store in 1927. Now, you know how many Puerto Ricans had to be here in 1927 for you to open a record store and survive? I mean, this is our history, and it's so rich. It is so full of music, of culture, of literature, of politics. We are not invisible. And I get passionate because I'm telling you, they want to make us invisible.
No, they're not gonna be able to erase us. And I gotta tell you,
they're trying so hard.
All the jewels you've been dropping, they are so important. And she just gave us like a real quick synopsis of some East Harlem history, mi gente.
Yeah, so, you know, we have people's shoulders that we stood on and that we have to remember, all right? It didn't just start out of nowhere. It was growing. It was like Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks didn't just come in one day and sit in a bus. All right, there was a process, there was a learning process, and there was a commitment. And we have to get that again. And if the pandemic, I feel, and this horrible administration we had before, again, you're a Buddhist. From good comes bad, from bad comes good. People have gotten so much more into politics, into civics. And I have to tell you, I really feel the whole Latin music industry, salsa, all of that came out of our public school education because we had music in the schools. We had art in the schools back. We had civics in the schools back then, and they took that out. The Reagan administration, Reaganomics took that out. They took it out for a reason, to dumb down the entire society, because we had music in public schools since public schools were started, because they were started by missionaries, and they believed that music gives you a certain moral center. It teaches you values. And even if you're a soloist, right? When you play in an orchestra, everyone has different parts.
Right.
But yet, when the music comes out, you're all together.
Right. It becomes one.
It becomes one.
It's a wonderful metaphor.
Yeah, the whole salsa industry happened because all those guys had bands when they were teenagers, and they were doing the school dances, and they were taking the classical music they were being trained with, and they were mixing it with the music of our parents, because mambo was my parents' music. That was not music. In fact, those guys like Tito Puente and Tito Rodriguez, they used to call us the sneaker crowd. Because when we were coming up, when you went to a club in those days, my parents anyway, you had to sit at a table and you got a set, and they put the bottle of rum and the bottle of soda and the ice. When we were coming up, it was like, yo, we wanted to go to the New Rican Village. We went in sneakers and jeans and no makeup. And I mean, that's what we were doing. And so they were like, well, we want some of that, because they saw how boogaloo, we gravitated to the boogaloo. Yeah. It was Latin rhythms with English lyrics. And now we weren't talking, because I'm growing up and my parents' music was all about the farm and the chicken and the rooster. And it was all about men talking about, if a woman did you wrong, kill her.
Right. Yeah. Well, you know, this is all leading into my next question for you. This is all leading into my next question for you as a professor, as a music lecturer, and an East Harlem tour guide, and everything that you're sharing, you know, and loaning it and passing it on your knowledge to the next generation. And as a historian, obviously you include some of your own experiences, and I, quite frankly speaking, I think it's detrimental to the sustainability of understanding our fundamental contribution to society. But aside from passing on information generation to generation, what do you think needs to happen in order to assure our cultural relevance doesn't suffer erasure, especially during this pandemic era?
We need to know our history, and we don't know it. It is amazing to me how we do not know our history. And one of the reasons I did the first video for the East Harlem Holiday Tree Committee, and I made it a tour of East Harlem, because I wanted people to know our history is deep, and our history runs parallel to Harlem's history, because we are one people here. And I wanted people to know this. And we've had a history of struggle and protest since the 30s. This didn't just happen in the late 60s. It's been happening, but they tone us down and then we come up again. And it keeps coming up and down, and I see it now. And we have to talk about these things. So in that video, I talked about the history of the artists. I talked about the history of East Harlem. Why is that tree so important? It brings light. Not only was East Harlem dirty, back in the day, if a street light went out, they didn't replace it. So if you were in the middle of Harlem and you looked towards East Harlem, it was all dark. If you see that that movie, Across 110th Street, it's all about, because there was this darkness. All this, evilness was going on. So I wanted, when you see the video, I wanted to show the light and the dark. and bringing that light, a tree with all this light, with all this illumination. Why do we have to go to Rockefeller Center to have that? We could have it right here. And people love it. You see the excitement on people's faces when we're bringing up the tree and when we light it, and the children. And then we work with the young explorers of the precinct. They fundraise to get all those presents for the children. And it really makes me feel bad because, you know, a lot of times I feel if the police were to work in tandem, let's say with the community, and they knew the community, I think we would have a much better relationship. But they bring in these cops. A lot of them are white. A lot of them are coming from New Jersey or Staten Island. They have their own preconceived notions about us. They don't know who we are. I don't believe in stop and frisk. My son was stopped and frisked at 15, coming to my office with his friend, and they put him up against the wall with a gun to their heads. I mean, this is not right. And that's because they don't know the community, and they're probably just as scared as anyone else. We need to have people that know the community. When I worked with these explorers and they talked about the kids and they knew the kids, and they're all Latinos, Blacks, Indios, Mexicanos. I mean,
we need people that look like us and understand our ways and are able to communicate in an efficient manner versus a physical manner, right?
Right. Like
I get where you're coming from.
Every community has district leaders. District leaders don't do that much. And I got to tell you, I'm very disappointed with the district leaders in East Harlem. My thinking is, if we had these cops coming in, the district leaders should meet with all the new ones. They should go around the community with them. They should tell them, Tito, this is Tito. He sells Lucy's on 116th Street, but he's harmless. This is this one. This is the other one. What is really needed in the community? We need, especially in this community now, we need gun control. We need, and then start specifying it so that the cops can work with us, not against us. And that's not happening.
Right. Well, I mean, this also loans itself to what you had said initially in the pandemic almost serving as a silver lining. And while all of these things are coming into fruition and being presented like in the forefront so that we can really confront it, right? Because it's always been there, but now it's kind of like out of hand in where, what are we going to do about it, right? And that's where we are. That's where we are. And I thank you for being so passionate about what it is that you represent within our community. And of course, for giving us that brief history lesson. I mean, we can go on and on and on. But
look, when we talk about gun control, the latest things I've seen in terms of gun control, I have not seen anyone talk about this. And right now, the penalties for having a gun are not that bad. Okay? I think if you had a penalty, they find you with a gun and they give you 25 years to life, that's going to give you a little bit more control than what you got now. Because what you got now is, and then they're talking about the guns are coming from Maryland, the guns are coming here. But I got to tell you, I hear the guys talking in the streets and they'll tell you they can go to Chinatown and get an illegal gun. Really quick.
East Harlem right now is getting a bad rap for that. And so my hope in this conversation is that we're shedding light on the unity that exists within East Harlem and the care, right? Because there's also the fact that some of these individuals may feel like they're invisible, which has been the topic of discussion. And so the true question before we go is, how do we create that community in which we are not divided by our class or our education or our race or our culture, and I'm talking about the immediate community, not forget about the boroughs, the immediate community, because that's also something that needs to be addressed. And while you address the policing aspect, the district leaders, it really starts with us. It really does.
It starts with us, and we have to realize that we have a history. We stand on the shoulders of other people who paved the way. We are not the be all and end all. And it saddens me when I see certain people that are supposed to be leaders and they're not leading. All they want is the glory for them and the spotlight for them. And yes, since I started my career, I've been involved in politics. And not only Melissa, I mean, I did the presidential campaign for Jesse Jackson. I did the campaign for mayor for Richard Ravage. One of my clients that I had for 10 years was the teachers union, who's very, very political. And I have to say,
you're talking about the United Federations of Teachers?
The UFT, yes. Yeah. And I have to say, my first big political campaign with the United Way had pressure from Elizabeth Colon, who had an organization of the Puerto Rican executive directors. And they were all together. She pressured them, the United Way, to start a Hispanic Federation. Right. Anyone who tells you anything else, that's a lie. All right. And the Hispanic Federation, I did the feasibility report to create the Hispanic Federation. And then they hired a firm of headhunters looking for the right executive director. At the time, Luis Miranda was leaving Koch, all right? And he was the one that got, but there were many other people that put their hats on there. I remember because I was part of that process. So people can tell you anything else or that they did it. And no, that was not. That roadmap was laid not only by the vision of a woman, but also advocacy from a lot of leaders. Right. We're all in this together.
Yourself included. Yourself included.
We're all in this together. Okay, there are no one star or it's just me and my son. No, we're all in this together. And the other thing is we have been here. There's also this perception. I never liked the word Nuyorican because the first time I heard Nuyorican was in Puerto Rico and it was by the elites to put us down. And I still see a lot of elites coming. And I hear how they talk about us, people born and raised here, and it's not the same thing. And so we're going to have our own people putting us down. I'm like, no, that's not how. And then rearranging the history.
Well, no, you said it. You said it already. You already said it, and really, your statement has been noted. It is we are all in this together. We're all in this together, and we're running out of time. And I really want to do these Spitfire questions before we go. So, are you ready for these Spitfire questions?
I'm ready, honey. I was born ready.
I know you are. Well, you have dropped some serious nuggets all day today. And thank you. It's amazing that you even have all of this memorized. It's amazing.
I know, right?
We're blessed to have you. Thank you, Aurora. All right, so here we go. Coffee or tea?
Coffee, café.
Pues claro. ¿Tostones o mofongo?
Tostones.
Ajá. ¿Acapurria o pastelillos?
Acapurria.
TV or reading?
Reading.
Shower or bath?
Bath. A nice, long, hot one.
All right, this is going to come up. Pants, PJs, or batas?
Pants.
And all right, one-piece bathing suit or two-piece?
One piece. I'm modest. Yeah.
Heels or flats?
Sneakers. Sneakers, honey. Silver sneakers. Silver sneakers.
Exactly what you said earlier, being the sneaker clan. Oh my gosh. Thank you, Aurora Flores, and thank you guys for joining us and honoring East Harlem luminary Aurora Flores in Harlem Is Healing. I am Rina Valentin, reflecting, reimagining, rebuilding a resolve for our reality through the arts with love. Adios.
Adios.